Hey, hello, this is Pastor Ken. I'll be right there. So I'm making some videos on the medical scare and what was it like to be a minister of the gospel in the middle of this medical scare. So I'm going to read a scripture for you and then I'll tell you my story. This comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27. This is in reference to Jesus after his death. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go and make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. So you'll see why I chose that scripture for my story. Now, just before a hospital decided to implement procedures, I was visiting an individual who was quite ill and went in and out of the hospital freely to visit this individual. But on this one day, everything changed. And I got a report that the individual was dying and requested my presence as minister of the gospel. So I went to the hospital with Bible in hand, expecting to be able to just go right into the room and speak with the person that I was to minister to as I had done the previous days. But on this particular occasion, I was stopped by an armed guard. The guard had a revolver, a taser, and I believe a billy club. And the guard was screening anyone going into the hospital. And so I stood in front of the guard, eye to eye, face to face, and I pleaded my case. I said, "Sir, I'm a minister of the gospel, and there's an individual in there who's dying, and they requested my presence to be in the room." And he said, "No one's admitted under any circumstance." I said, "Sir, I'm a minister. Look, I've got a Bible." He says, "Well, anybody can hold a Bible," and almost like he's trying to say, "You're not really a minister and you don't fool me." I said, "Sir, honestly, I'm a minister, and honestly, there's a person in that room who possibly is dying." Well, the guard said, "No one's admitted to this hospital. No one's going in or out under my authority." And I repeated my plea. "Sir, please, I do believe the individual is dying, and the family requested my presence to comfort them in the midst of this major crisis in their life." And he began to look at me, and I think he was thinking, maybe he was being a little too harsh on me, because he was talking to me like I was a criminal who had committed some type of crime. I even kind of worried maybe he wasn't going to get out his taser and taser me. Now, what you need to know is the hospital came up with the brilliant idea of hiring active duty police officers in their off-duty time. So in other words, this guard was functioning as a police officer on the streets of the city and treating me as if I was some type of criminal wanting to come and visit an individual who is dying. I know this sounds a little bit far-fetched, but it actually happened. So he began to soften just a little bit, thinking maybe there is something to this story. He says, well, I'll call up to the room. And I gave him the room and everything. And then after he spoke on the phone, he dropped his head like a little child. Now remember, he spoke to me like I was a criminal and he was going to billy club me or taser me. He dropped his head and he mumbled, "We just lost," and he gave the name of the person. He dropped his head like a little child. Now remember, he's a strong man, and he's got a gun, and he's got a taser, and everything else. And he drops his head. "We just lost her." We? Just a minute ago, you treated me like a criminal. Yeah, you can go up to the room. No, I'm not making any of this up. This truly happened to me. And this hospital truly hired a police officer in his off-duty time to function as a screening individual as to who's going to come and go in this hospital. This truly happened. Now there's plenty more I can tell you about what a nightmare was going on for ordinary people who had loved ones, not only in hospitals, but in nursing homes. And you wait till I get to the nursing home stories. So they wanted to secure the tomb, post a guard, turn a hospital into a situation where you have an armed guard. Well, you have to understand that I had had 40 years of going in and out of hospitals. And never had I been treated in such a fashion. It was rather frightening to me as to what was happening in our country with respect to hospitals and nursing homes. So, I'm only trying to bring out some of my stories so you can hear about the other side of this medical scare that occurred in our country. Thank you for watching. This is the end of the video.